welcome back to my channel. My name is Jaime Leigh, and here on my channel I do art things. Sometimes I will do time-lapse painting videos, sometimes it's Lightbox videos and tutorials, and sometimes it's weird art videos. I have several playlists. I'll pop one up here right now if you want to go check any of those out. And today's video is a Lightbox video. What I was attempting to do is take a Lightbox drawing and turn it into a marker based piece of artwork, and we're just gonna see how it went because this was a struggle and it's because I had never used markers before to do art. So I found my reference photo on unsplash.com. That's where I find a lot of my reference photos because they upload photos there for free use. And something I did different this time is I did my Lightbox drawing of my portrait reference, and then I wanted to do a background on my artwork before I got started doing any of the other things. And I got this idea from another content creator here on YouTube. Her name is Leigh Bruckner, and she has a channel here. I'll leave a link to it below. And that was where I first came across the idea, number one, to use markers in a portrait, and number two, to take a background from something that you are inspired by and incorporate it into your own artwork. I landed upon Japanese artwork. I found this background that I really liked, and I decided to use that as a basis for my background. And what I did is I took that artwork, I printed it out. So I took my original drawing that I had done for my portrait, that same piece of paper, and then underneath it I put the background photo reference that I was going to use, and I simply used the Lightbox to put that background element around the portrait I had already drawn. It's kind of hard to see in the video part of this, but when I was doing the Lightbox drawing part of it, I could see where my portrait was, so I knew where the background elements needed to fit in to go behind my portrait subject. One thing I want to mention is that you don't have to be a slave to your reference photos. If you want to change up something, then you are more than able to do that. For example, because of the background that I had chosen, in a lot of the Japanese artworks that I was looking at, people had their hair twisted up into like a little bun or something like that. And so I thought it would be fun to add these little space buns, I guess you would call them. Don't ever think that you have to just stick with what's, staring you right in the face in your reference photo. I had been seeing these particular markers all over YouTube lately, and they were called the Ohuhu marker set, and they're supposed to be very on par with Copic markers, which are much more expensive. These Ohuhu markers are incredibly affordable. They're alcohol-based markers, and I had seen a couple months ago, I had seen several YouTubers share videos where they had talked about these markers or used these markers. And I was interested because I'd never done any marker-based art. I'm a painter. I like paint. That's my favorite thing to use, but I'm always looking for new things to try, and I saw some videos where people use these markers, and I was kind of intrigued to see if I could do something with them as well. So I ordered a set of the Ohuhu markers several months ago, and they've just literally been sitting at my art desk. I guess it's a combination of I was a little intimidated by them because I'd never used them before, and also I just wasn't really sure what I was going to do. So first things first, the markers come in this cute little bag so you can store them all together. They even come with a swatch card that you can take all of the markers and swatch the colors on the swatch card and keep it with the markers, which I actually found to be incredibly helpful because when I was picking out the colors to use for this particular artwork, I just referred to the swatch cards several times throughout doing this so I could see what the color I was thinking of using actually was going to look like on the paper, because sometimes the colors are either lighter or darker or a different tone than you're expecting once they're swatched on the paper. So that was really helpful. I was really pleased that they included that and that I took the time to go through and do the swatches, because that was a really good reference to have. So one thing that I did is I looked at my reference photo and I kind of picked out a handful of markers that I thought would be the best match for the reference that I was doing, and I just dove right in and just started coloring my drawing with markers. And to be completely honest with you, I have no idea if that was the best way to do it. As soon as I started using the markers, they were really easy to use. The colors are very bright. I really like the different colors they included. This was the 40-piece set, so there's quite a few colors in here, you know, pretty much what you would need. But I also knew as I was going along here just coloring with markers that I had no idea how I was going to turn this into an actual artwork portrait, because I felt like the markers were going on great, the colors were good, but I was not skilled using them, I guess, is the thing that was bugging me the most, because as you can see, there is a hard edge with the markers that you don't find in, say, a watercolor. You can feather out a watercolor to make the edges basically diffused, so you don't have that hard edge unless you want it. There is the piece where you color it in, but you have, I'm not even really sure how to describe it, but you have some darker and lighter areas as you're coloring in a large part of your drawing. So I was just kind of going through using the markers, telling myself we're just gonna go for it and see how it goes. And so that's what I did. And through most of the time that I was drawing, I absolutely hated it. Some parts of it were coming out, you know, fine, but then, you know, I started out jumping right in on the skin of her arms and her face. I feel like I made a mistake right off the bat with how I went about that. I put the marker as her hair, and I thought, how in the heck am I going to turn this into actual hair, because it just looks like stick lines. When I did the background, I colored in, you know, blocks of color, but you can see the lines from the marker. So I really was struggling with how to best use these, and I kind of felt like I was in over my head. And to be honest, throughout several points in doing this, I really thought about scrapping the entire drawing and just starting over. Now, that is a viable option sometimes. If you're in the middle of an artwork and you love the concept, you love the reference photo, you love what you're doing, but it's not turning out the way you want it to, you can scrap it and start over. I have done that many times, because there comes a certain point where you've tried to fix things too much and it's never going to work out the way you were hoping. And there's no shame in starting over. You can always abandon an artwork and, you know, use that canvas or paper for something else completely. You can gesso over it. You can cut it up and use it in something. Like, you can do all kinds of things with an abandoned piece of artwork. So no shame in starting over, but I specifically didn't start over, even though I wanted to, on this artwork, because I had told myself I'm going to try these markers and see how it works. And if I just started over, you know, I even thought about quitting and just doing this with watercolors like I normally do, but I was like, well, what good is that going to do? Because then I wouldn't have used the markers to make an artwork. And that was kind of the whole point of this, is to try out these markers and see what I could do with them. So I persevered even when I didn't want to. And if you are looking at this going, what in the hell? Trust me, so was I. I was definitely thinking, what the hell have I gotten myself into? Maybe I should just stick with paints because that's what I'm good at. But as you can see, there's a lot more video left here, so I continued on. I did not start over, and basically I used the colors that I thought would, you know, be good for this particular portrait, and then I tried to work with what I had, even though I wasn't very happy with it for a very long time. is another part in my artwork where I veered off from the reference photo. In the photograph, the girl is wearing a very pretty, like, blue flowered shirt, but right away I knew that shirt would not work with this artwork that I was doing. So instead of doing the shirt as it was in the photo, I decided to just make it a neutral color. It kind of goes with the artwork, but it doesn't stand out, it doesn't clash, it doesn't require me doing a bunch of tiny detailed little flowers. I just decided to take that tan marker, go ahead, fill in her shirt, and then later on you'll see that I finish it out, but it's a very neutral shirt just because the shirt isn't really important here. I mean, it's important that she's wearing a shirt, but what it looks like is not really the point of the artwork, so I just decided to make it something very basic and let it kind of blend in with the rest of the artwork. Once I had laid out all of the colors on my page using the markers, I decided, because I hated it, to be very blunt, I hated it. I was like, okay, so how can I save this? And what I decided to do was to do what I would always do with watercolors. I grabbed my colored pencils and I'm just going to go through and color in areas of this artwork using my colored pencils to try to enhance the colors of the markers, to try to blend things better, to add details, etc. There's certain things I couldn't do with the markers, like I could not add tiny details to the eyes and lips and that sort of thing. Plus, there were places where I had put down marker with the hard edge that just did not look right if I left it that way. So I decided to take my colored pencils and go over the markers to try to see if I could basically save this artwork as is and not have to either, number one, start over, or number two, try to struggle to make the markers work just by themselves. The markers provided a good color base for all of the areas of the artwork, kind of like watercolors do when I'm doing the same technique using watercolor paint. So that's kind of the mindset I use to go forward from here. Okay, how can I fix this artwork so that I'm happy with it when I'm finished? And how can I use other art mediums to finish out this artwork with the marker as my base colors? And it seemed to me that colored pencils was a great option because, number one, I'm using art paper to do this on, and colored pencils work really well with, doing watercolor on art paper. So I figured marker might be the same thing. So I figured I'd try that. So basically what I'm doing now is I'm going through the areas of my artwork. I'm using my colored pencils to add details and to smooth out any areas where the markers kind of overlapped each other and left a hard edge. And I decided to either try to work with the marker that was there or to try to blend over the marker that was there. For example, on the face, I tried to blend over, especially on her cheeks for that pink color. I went in full ham with that pink color, and then I was like, ow, great, now how am I going to fix this? So I just used my colored pencils to try to make that look as good as I could. But then on other areas of the artwork, for example, on her arms where I used vertical marker strokes, I kind of worked with that when I used my colored pencils because the vertical strokes on her arms didn't really bother me that much. It's not a bad detail. It just kind of gives you a little bit of the, texture of working with a marker, but it kind of worked with her arms. It wasn't super important like her face. So I was a little more okay with how that looked. I also was able to use the colored pencils on the background for like the trees behind her and kind of work with the marker that I had put down instead of having to cover it over completely. And then I really had to do a lot of work with her hair using the colored pencils because the marker strokes just made it look like a 6-year-old had done it, and that's not quite the look I was going for. So I just had to figure out how to take the marker I had already put down and use my colored pencils to enhance what was there and make it look like actual hair instead of just a bunch of colored lines, basically. One thing I knew I wanted to do for this artwork that was different from things I've done before is when I was looking at my references for doing my background, a lot of the Japanese artworks had some gold areas, and I thought it would be really fun to take some of the gold foil that I knew I had and use that on the background in the areas where I used the yellow marker. So basically what I did is I took some Mod Podge on a paintbrush and I painted the Mod Podge in the area, a small section of the area where I was going to put down the gold foil. I had a little canister of gold flakes, little gold foil flakes. And so once I had the Mod Podge put down, I used that same paintbrush to just pick up pieces of the gold flakes and got a little more Mod Podge and kind of painted those into place using the Mod Podge, and I filled in that yellow marker area with that gold. And that was the look that I had wanted, and so I just figured, let's see if I can kind of make this look like it did in my head, and I think I did an okay job of it. I liked the way it turned out. I liked having that gold there as a nod to the reference artwork that I had chosen. Also, I liked just having that gold there because it was another piece of mixed media that I thought was a fun touch for this artwork. I mentioned earlier that I didn't really care for the way the marker covered in the background. I could see the marker strokes and I didn't want it to stay that way. So I thought what I might try is to take my colored pencil of a similar color to the marker and just kind of go over those areas using like a circular drawing motion. And because the marker had already covered the background, the white, I was able to go over all those areas using the colored pencil, and it took away that marker stroke, but it also left the background, covered in and looking a little bit textured, which I kind of like the effect. So that actually ended up working out not so bad, and I only had to do one layer pretty much of the colored pencil. I didn't have to go over it and over it with, you know, different layers of colored pencil because the marker was already there. So I felt like one layer of colored pencil did what I wanted it to do, kind of took away those marker strokes and left the background looking a little bit textured and dark red like I wanted it to. So that worked out. I blended out her shirt area using a little bit of rubbing alcohol. That is a solvent that you can use with colored pencils that helps smooth the pigment over the paper. So I did that on the shirt area just to kind of give a little bit of a smooth look to the shirt instead of the grainy colored pencil that was there before. I really struggled with the nose on this one. I had used the markers originally to define the nose, and I found that the lines that were there made it look really weird. So I tried to fix it using colored pencils, which helped a little bit. I needed to get the end of her nose where her nostrils were and like those nose wings looking better than they did because I was not happy with how it all looked. And I ended up using the colored pencils, and then I had to grab my gel pen, my white gel pen, Jelly Roll, and I put a layer of white kind of on the top part of the nose above her nostrils and where like the ball of the nose would be. And I kind of blended it out a little bit with my fingers so that it wasn't quite so obvious that it was a gel pen that did that. And once I let that white gel pen sit there, I went back over it with my colored pencils again to kind of define it a little more and end up with it looking a little bit more like a nose than it did. bottom edge of the painting was left white through most of the time I was doing this, mostly because I didn't really know what I was going to do down there. And I figured I would just continue the artwork down to the edge of the paper. So I took the green all the way down. I took her arms and her shirt all the way down, and then I used kind of the same colors I had used before to fill in where it looked like her arms would be and where the green of the background would be. And then I took a similar green pencil and I did the same thing I did on the red background. I just went over it using like a circular drawing motion to cover over that green to take away those marker lines. And then I also defined the ends of her forearms a little bit better, took away that line as much as I could between where I had originally done the marker and where I filled it in after. And because that area of the drawing, you know, it's not super important down there. What's more important is her face and what's up above. So I just kind of left that the way it was. And I feel like that worked pretty good to fill in that area, take away the white, but not get too crazy with it. So here is the finished artwork. I added a little bit of gold on the lettering. I figured that would work out well with the gold in the background. I consider this to be completed. Do I love it? Actually, I love it a lot more than I thought I would. I feel like it was a success. It was definitely a struggle, not the marker's fault, more the operator's fault. It was more me just not knowing, you know, how best to use the markers. So I'm actually really happy with how it turned out, despite how much I struggled to make the drawing come out looking nice. So yeah, I would say I would give it a thumbs up. I feel like I did a good job fixing my mistakes throughout the, time I was working on it, and it came out with a pretty cool artwork at the end. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you being here. If you would like to subscribe, please hit the subscribe button. You can hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload new videos. And yeah, so this is how I took a Lightbox drawing and turned it into a finished marker-based artwork. All right, have a great day. See you next time. Bye.